The Yangtze River, China's longest waterway, was banned from all fishing for 10 years. What happened next turned into one of the most dramatic ecological recoveries ever recorded. The Yangtze River stretches almost 4,000 miles from the Tibetan Plateau to the East China Sea. It's the third longest river on Earth, 3 times the length of the Mekong, and for centuries the Chinese have called it the Mother River. Around 400 million people depend on it. The river basin alone generates 40% of China's entire economic output, and beneath its surface, 424 fish species once thrived, with 183 of them found nowhere else on the planet. But by the time China finally acted, the Yangtze was dying. To understand why Beijing made one of the most radical conservation decisions in modern history, you need to understand what was lost. This story doesn't begin with recovery, it begins with extinction. In the 1950s, roughly 6,000 baiji dolphins swam through the Yangtze. The baiji, sometimes called the goddess of the Yangtze, was woven into Chinese mythology. According to legend, a young girl fleeing her evil stepfather was reborn as a dolphin, and for centuries, fishermen considered encountering one a blessing. By 1970, only a few hundred remained. By 1997, 13. In 2006, a 6-week scientific survey covering the entire length of the river found 0. The baiji was declared functionally extinct, becoming the first documented global extinction of a large aquatic vertebrate in over 50 years. An entire mammal family, Lepodidae, vanished from the earth. Then came the Chinese paddlefish. This was one of the largest freshwater fish ever recorded, with specimens stretching over 12 feet and possibly reaching 23 feet in length. During the 1970s, about 25 tons were harvested annually. By 1993, the species was functionally extinct. The last one was seen alive in 2003. In July 2022, the IUCN made it official: gone forever. In total, 135 freshwater species disappeared from the Yangtze River system. And it wasn't just about extinctions. The overall fish catch told its own devastating story. In 1954, fishermen hauled 427,000 tons of fish from the Yangtze and its branches, including the economically vital black carp, grass carp, silver carp, and bighead carp that formed the backbone of Chinese freshwater fisheries. By 2016, that number had collapsed by nearly 85% to just 66,000 tons. Scientists assessed the river's biological integrity index and found it had plummeted to the lowest possible level, a classification they described simply as no fish. Illegal methods like electric shocks and fine mesh nets were wiping out juvenile populations before they ever had a chance to mature. The river that had sustained Chinese civilization for millennia was being emptied. China had tried smaller measures before. Spring fishing moratoria began in 2002, temporarily closing portions of the river during spawning season. But these seasonal pauses weren't enough. The fish populations kept declining. The Finless porpoise, the baiji's smaller cousin often called the smiling angel for its upturned mouth, dropped to just over 1,000 individuals by 2017. Even the Chinese alligator, another endemic species that once thrived in Yangtze wetlands, had dwindled to critically low numbers. Something far more drastic was needed. On January 1, 2020, China imposed a fishing ban across 332 conservation areas along the Yangtze Basin. Then, on December 26th of that year, the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress adopted the Yangtze River Protection Law, the first legislation in Chinese history written specifically for a single river basin. 96 provisions across 9 chapters, permanent fishing bans in critical waters, restrictions on sand mining, a prohibition on building chemical plants within 1 kilometer of the river, national coordination mechanisms for enforcement, and then, on January 1st, 2021, the full 10-year moratorium took effect. All commercial fishing ceased across the river's main streams, its estuary, the massive Dongting and Poyang lakes, and 7 major tributaries. The ban stretched across a dozen provincial-level regions from Qinghai to Shanghai. 231,000 fishermen surrendered nearly 111,000 boats. Entire communities that had fished the Yangtze for generations were asked to walk away from the only livelihood they had ever known. This was not cheap. China channeled 27 billion yuan, roughly $3.8 billion, into compensation and support. Each fisherman who surrendered their boats and gear received a one-time payment of over 200,000 yuan, about $30,000. The government provided employment assistance, full pension coverage, and monthly living allowances. By the end of September 2024, all 142,000 fishermen who had the ability and willingness to work had been re-employed, and 220,000 eligible fishermen were enrolled in pension programs. Many former fishers found a poetic second act. They became river guardians, patrolling the same waters they once fished, monitoring for illegal activity, and helping protect the ecosystem they had depended on for survival. So did it work? The results, published in the journal Science in February 2026, were staggering. Researchers from the Chinese Academy of Sciences found a 209% increase in overall fish biomass. The river's fish populations had more than tripled. Species richness jumped 13%, from 308 species to 351, a gain of 43 species. Larger fish, those longer than 7.5 inches, benefited the most, with their numbers increasing at the highest rates. In the Qishui River, 11 endemic fish species that had seemingly vanished reappeared after the ban, and the smiling angel, the Yangtze Finless porpoise, climbed from 1,012 individuals in 2017 to 1,249 in 2022, then reached 1,426 in 2025. In April 2023, scientists achieved a world first by successfully releasing captive-bred cetaceans back into a wild population. The most extraordinary moment came in April 2025. Researchers released 20 adult Yangtze sturgeons into the Qishui River. Days later, they detected spawning activity. By dawn on April 12th, the team spotted fertilized eggs. An estimated over 200,000 had been scattered across the spawning ground. On April 16th, the first hatchlings emerged. Tiny, wriggling proof that the Yangtze sturgeon could still reproduce in the wild. It was the first successful natural reproduction of this critically endangered species in over 2 decades. But this story has complications. Stephen Cook, a fisheries professor at Carleton University and co-author of the science study, offered a necessary counterpoint. The biggest takeaway, he said, is let's do a better job of managing our freshwater rivers, so we never have to consider full fishing bans as the medicine. Although this seems to have been effective here, the collateral damage to fishing communities is immense. The fishing ban alone cannot solve everything. The Three Gorges Dam and the Git Dam still fragment the river, blocking migratory routes that species like the Chinese sturgeon have followed for millions of years. Microplastics flow freely from the densely populated cities along the basin. Illegal fishing, while declining sharply, still occurs in remote stretches. A campaign in Chongqing drove criminal cases for illegal harvesting, down from nearly 1,400 in 2020 to 573 in 2024. But the problem persists. Still, progress continues. From 2020 to 2024, 3 provinces decommissioned 342 small hydropower stations along the Qishui River basin and dismantled 300 dams, reconnecting habitat that had been severed for decades. Sebastian Bros, an ecologist at the University of Toulouse, put it plainly. These results show that strong political decisions are required to restore biodiversity. This is an encouraging message because biodiversity loss is often seen as irreversible. That last point is worth sitting with. We're often told that once ecosystems collapse, they're gone. That extinction is a one-way door, and sometimes it is. The baiji is never coming back. The Chinese paddlefish is never coming back. But the Yangtze is proving that collapse isn't always the end of the story. Given space and time, nature can recover with a speed and force that surprises even the scientists studying it. The ban runs until 2030. The river's still healing, and experts are now asking whether similar bold action could catalyze recovery in other threatened waterways. The Mekong, the Amazon, rivers we're still losing while we debate whether saving them is worth the cost. The Yangtze's answer is clear. It was worth it. The question is whether anyone else is willing to pay the price. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.